If you want your church to stop bleeding great people, it's time to stop praying for commitment and start designing for it. Commitment isn't a personality trait. It's often a product of the system people are a part of. So in this episode, we're not just talking about why people leave, we're building the kind of systems that make people want to stay. Welcome to Church Made Simple, where churches thrive when everyone knows what to do and why it matters. This podcast exists to replace confusion with confidence, one conversation at a time, so your team can serve with clarity, confidence, and purpose. Hey, in the last episode, we talked about this painful reality of great people walking away when the system doesn't support them. Today, we're going to flip that script and ask, how do we build healthy, people-first systems that multiply commitment, connection, and longevity in ministry? Well, to answer that, let's talk about systems that make people stay. First, we have to have this mindset shift. Healthy systems are about designing experiences, not just managing processes. Now, church is not a product, but the experience that people have in your church shapes how long they stay and then how deeply they're actually going to engage. And the experience they have is actually shaped by the systems you have in place. Just start thinking about it here. What does it feel like to actually join your church? Have you ever thought about that? What is the system in place for people to join your church? What does it look like? Is joining your church just showing up? Is joining your church an 8-hour membership class? Is joining your church a video online? Is joining your church, going through 12-step program? Like, what does it look like? And how does it feel to actually go through that system and that process? Well, what does it feel like to serve on a team? How do you start serving on a team? What does it feel like, not just the first day, but what does it feel like 1 year from the time you start serving on a team? What does it feel like to speak up about something you're concerned about? What does it feel like to ask somebody for help? Or what does it feel like to just take a break? If any of these experiences feel confusing, isolating, or even overly demanding, then people are going to disconnect. So what I want to introduce to you is a fresh framework, what I'm calling the STAY system. It's a 4-part framework with 4 essential components that build a healthy ecosystem where people in your church can actually thrive. Let's start with the S. S is simply to start strong. The first experience that somebody has in your church will start framing the entire journey that they go on. So we want to create these consistent, relationship-centered onboarding processes. If the process to become a member of your church is simply to watch a video or come to a class and then sign a form and that's it, that's not relationship-centered. And it feels very transactional. I'll use an example. One of the churches I was at, 2 friends of mine, they had been there for years before me, and they refused to become members. They never wanted to be members of any church, but we committed to that church, and so they said, we're going to go through the membership class. And I remember they made fun of it, honestly, because it was like this 4-hour class, and then they signed this certificate that basically just said that they would bring tithes and offerings and, commit to support the church, whatever that means, but there was no clarity on that. And then they brought them up in the front and then introduced the whole church to them, which was really awkward as well because this couple had been a part of this church for years, but was just now becoming a member. And so they're introducing them as new members when in reality, they've been serving, giving, they've been members. They just didn't have a piece of paper. And it made them feel very, very awkward. So to become a part of your church, is it relationship-centered? To become a servant of the house, to serve in a capacity of ministry, is it relationship-centered? Here's what I would suggest. If you want to start strong, assign a first friend or some kind of welcoming person for every new volunteer. You could call them a coach, you could call them a leader, whatever it is, but there needs to be somebody that when somebody joins a team, this is who they're attached at the hip to. This is who is leading them. This is who is helping communicate to them why we do what we do. They're building a friendship with them, a relationship with them. And then don't just talk roles at people. Don't just talk about what we do. Talk about why we do it. You have to talk vision to people. You have to talk culture to people. You have to share with people why they matter. Otherwise, you get people who just feel like they're filling a position and they're not actually a part of the local church. So start strong. T, you have to have touch points that matter. So your system has to intentionally communicate before burnout hits. You have to intentionally communicate. Your system must be designed in such a way that you're intentionally communicating before burnout hits. So schedule consistent one-on-one check-ins, like every, 4 to 6 weeks with every team member. If you're a leader of a team, you should be having one-on-one check-ins. We have a new director of an area of ministry, and that was my first thing with him because his area of ministry is very technologically focused. And I said, listen, if you want to be effective as a director, the first thing you need to do is you need to check in on each of your team members. He said, well, how do I do that? I said, you have the best opportunity every Sunday morning. Your team is here way before any other team members. So when you get here, I want you to check in with them. How are they doing? Not just in church, in their position, but how are they doing in life? Have touch points to make sure that they know that you care about them personally, not that you care that they showed up to fulfill their task for this Sunday. So use these one-on-ones for care, not correction. How are you doing? What's life been like for you lately? And then jot down maybe in a notes app or something like that, key things to remember about that person, key things that you can pray for that person. We've had team members before who you ask them, how are you doing? And they might start out with, I'm fine. But you read the room, there's something wrong. And as they begin talking, they start sharing some things that they're going through. Write those down. Reach out to them through the week and say, hey, I'm praying for you, and then actually pray for them. And if you hear something that really feels like, man, this is really a burden to them, you need to ask them this question. Are you still good to serve right now? Do you need a break? This will really build emotional equity that will keep people anchored through difficult seasons. A, advance the individual. Healthy systems create growth, not just positions. Healthy systems create growth, not just positions. So does each person on your team know how they can grow, both spiritually and as a leader? Can a greeter become a coach in 12 months? What does progression look like on your team? Or are people required or expected to just stay in the same position for years on end until they die? People will stay where they see purpose and potential. But most people that are serving in your church, they don't even see their own purpose or potential. They need you to call it out of them. So if you're leading a team, whether you're paid staff, you're the pastor, you're a volunteer leader, you have to call out the purpose and potential in people that you see. Why? Not the question why, but the letter Y. Yield with grace. Life changes constantly. So your system should be flexible without fracturing itself. There should be clear communication in every area of your church, how somebody can step back, how they can take a break, how they can shift roles without feeling guilty. You know the number one reason why people will not step away from a serving place, a serving position in your church is because they feel guilty. They feel like nobody else can do it because you don't have a system in place where they are training somebody else to do what they've done. They feel guilty because they made a commitment and now life just hit them out of nowhere. They feel guilty because they feel like they're going to get disconnected. Hey, maybe this is your church. When people stop serving, they're no longer actually a part of the body. They're no longer a part of the community. They don't have contact with people. They lose friends and relationships. Your system should be a way where people can say, hey, I need to step back. I'm dealing with something right now. And they still have community. They don't have to suffer with guilt. So build off-ramps that will preserve people's dignity, not pressure their performance. Because when people know that they can press pause without a major penalty, without feeling excommunicated, they are way more likely to return in the future. Here's where most churches get stuck. Even with a good heart and vision, churches stall because they over-rely on personal charisma. If your system only works when you're in the room, it's not a system, it's a dependency. So you have to create this repeatable experience that doesn't rely on personality. If you are the main one driving the system, but you can't take a Sunday off without your team falling apart, That's not a system. That's a dependency. I was so honored as I'm recording this past weekend. I was invited to go be a guest speaker at another church, a sister church of ours. And I was excited because I had never preached in this particular church's new building. They had remodeled an old historic building. So it was exciting for me. And I got to be honest, I told my team, this is one of the first times in years that I don't just feel comfortable walking away. I feel confident walking away because I know that we have systems in place that everything on Sunday at our church is going to run great because of you. Here's the key though. I wasn't the only one out. We had, I think, 3 or 4 other key leaders that were out as well. They were already scheduled to be out, and things still ran very well. It was a wonderful Sunday. So I don't have to be present for the system to take place. I don't have to be present for people to do what they know they're supposed to do, for the vision to be built, for the mission to go forward. Why? Because we have a system in place that's a repeatable experience. Churches also fail when they confuse busyness with health. Man, I used to be guilty of this. I am wired to do things. I'm wired to pioneer, to build things, to put my hands on things, to mold things, to break things, to restructure things. And so there were years where I was full speed ahead all the time, especially in my early 20s. I remember my mom one time in her wisdom told me, you are running too thin and eventually you're going to tear. And I thought, Mom, you are crazy. And I remember, I think I was maybe 22, 23. I was full-time in ministry. I was working probably 90 hours a week and then working part-time jobs on top of that, starting side businesses, things like that. My calendar was full. And I remember there was this one week where I got so sick. I had never been that sick before. Now, I'd experienced sinus infections, I'd had a stomach bug, things like that. It wasn't that. I mean, it was my body was shutting down. And my mom said, you're tearing. You're tearing. Listen, a full calendar does not mean full hearts. Activity does not equal alignment in your church. Healthy systems are going to make sure that people know the why behind the what so that they serve from vision, not obligation. There's no reason for people to feel like 24/7 they must be at church or they must be doing something for your church. In fact, I would say this, the busier you are, the more likely it is that your church is unhealthy. The busier your team is, the more likely your church is unhealthy. What do I mean by busyness? Do I mean that there's work to do? Absolutely not. There's seasons where, man, it is everybody hands in. Christmas, Easter, hello. But even with Christmas and Easter, do you need to have people at the church 24/7, 2 weeks leading up to Easter? Absolutely not. Because if you cast a vision for your Easter services months in advance, and you create systems months in advance, people shouldn't even have to be at church 48 hours before Easter services. People shouldn't feel obligated to be there because busyness is not health. Another way that churches fail with this is they prioritize gaps over gifts. Listen, we have done this so many times, and I've had to learn the hard way. You can't just fill gaps with anybody. Don't just fill a hole. You have to call somebody into alignment with who they are, who God has called them to be. Healthy systems will match people with purpose, not people with need. So there have been times in my leadership where we have a gap. We need a kids director. We need a students director. We need, maintenance person, whoever it is. And if someone just kind of barely describes themselves in such a way that it feels like they will be a good fit, we would throw them in because we had this fear. If the gap stays too long, it becomes the Grand Canyon and it's going to swallow up the entire church. The truth is, this is going to hurt somebody's feelings. You don't have to have a kids ministry. You don't have to have a guest experience ministry right now. If you don't have the people, let's say you're in a rural community and you've got 100 people in your church, let's say even less, let's say you got 35 people in your church. You don't need a 30-person kids ministry. Why? Because you're only going to have 5 people in service. Get creative. Just because there's a gap doesn't mean you're just going to put somebody in and go, okay, we have to have a kids ministry now. That person might hate kids. Healthy systems help match people with purpose, not just need. So if you see a gap, don't just throw somebody in. Pray about it. Ask the Lord to show you who the right person is. Start having intentional conversations with people in your church to hear their heart, hear how they match up with the vision, and see what God's purpose is in their lives. So I want to encourage you, implement this structure quickly. So here's how you can get started. I want you to take the next 4 weeks and build your stay system this month. So the first week, here's what you're going to do. You're going to map your volunteer journey. I want you to document every step from somebody saying, I'm interested, to finally saying, I'm empowered. Map every step that you have currently and ask some questions. What's missing? What's confusing? Where is there tension and friction? Where is there utter silence? You're going to spend an entire week with your team, or, hey, if you're the sole person, you're going to do this as the pastor. Map your entire volunteer journey. Once you establish that, go to week 2. And I want you to add just one relational touch point in this system. Choose just one team, and I want you to assign one person to do one check-in conversation this week. Just see how it goes. Don't do it for every team. Don't do a sweeping model of this. One relational touch point, just to see how it goes, test it out. Then you can start duplicating it as the months progress. In week 3, I want you to design some kind of growth track or system for people on your team. And it doesn't have to be complicated. It can literally just be 3 different levels that you title new, developing, and leading. And what you're going to do is you're going to sit down and write down to communicate what the path is and invite people into it. Don't do it for every person in your church. Just start with a few people and tell them, hey, can you be our guinea pig? We're trying to develop leaders in this church, and I feel like we're not doing a good job. So we have 3 different phases to this. People who are new volunteers, people who are developing as they're in their volunteer role, and people who are leading volunteers. And I'm asking if you would help me develop this. Design some kind of growth pattern, growth pathway in this system. The last week, I want you to create an off-ramp plan. You can create a very gracious, heartfelt email template for when somebody needs a break and they tell you they need a break, that you can send them. And make sure, by the way, don't just create a template just to say I can send it, but think through, have sections that you can replace. But there should be consistent verbiage across the board that when somebody says, I need a break, I need to step back, we offer them grace and we have the same language every time. Of course, you want to input what it specifically is they're going through, how you're praying for them, but think through. If I was the pastor of the church and I had to take a break, I know my people would have my back. So what is it that they would say to me that I need to say to them? And then teach your team how to navigate that conversation with absolute compassion. Absolute compassion. Listen, God will bless grace, but he won't bless guilt. And if you're terrified that somebody has to back away, but you can offer them grace, I can almost guarantee you God is going to take care of the needs of your team, just like he's going to take care of the needs of that person who's being burdened in your church. If you want people to stay, stop making it hard to be a part of your church. Make it clear, make it relational, and make it sustainable. Because systems do not disciple people, but broken systems can derail discipleship. Healthy systems make your ministry stick. And listen, if you get this right, your best people won't just stay, they will actually start bringing other people with them. And that's what we want to see in your church. So thank you for joining me for today's episode of Church Made Simple. And here's what I want you to do. I want you to put this stuff into action. So there's 2 free resources I'm going to give you in our resource vault this week. First, you can download the Stay System Starter Guide. It's a PDF. It's going to be a tool that will help you start building today. Those 4 things I told you, week 1, week 2, week 3, week 4. There's also a discussion guide on top of that where you can get with your team this week and start communicating about this episode. And if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to the podcast, whether that be on YouTube, Spotify, or Apple Podcasts, because we are here to help you make church simple again. Share this episode with somebody you know in a church that needs help. And next time, we're going to unpack the one system every church should start with and how to build it without burning out your team or overcomplicating the process. I'll see you next time.